welcome to all of you for our webinar on Nursing Beyond the Bedside. And what I hope to do is share with you perhaps a career you may not have thought of before, and that is a career in life sciences. So I became very interested in this because I spent 25 years as a nurse myself working at Merck. And it was the second life science company that I worked at. Hi, Lisa. And what I realized at Merck was there were nurses working all over the company and in a variety of roles, which I can show you in a moment. But we all agreed on one thing. And that one thing was that we never learned about this industry when we were in school. And so we each found our way to this industry just sort of happenstance. So what I'd like to do is just do a couple of introductory slides, and then we're going to get right over to our guest of honor, Lisa Lee. The first is what is the opportunity for nurses in life science? And let me first describe that life science companies comprise biopharmaceutical companies, medical device companies, diagnostic companies, and then a whole host of companies that support that industry as well. And what I think is so unique as an opportunity for nurses is that this industry is really focused on the patient. There weren't always many years. They were very focused on just simply the learned intermediary, the physician, to talk about what would be important for patients. And we now know that many times physicians don't always know what patients value or what they're looking for, longer life or better quality of life. So nurses know that, and nurses understand the sites of care. They have medical and clinical knowledge that's so valuable to these industries. This is an industry that offers a financially rewarding benefit package. Some of these companies still even offer a pension, which is fantastic. Career progression, I'll show you a number of roles that nurses take on. And it's even an opportunity for nurses maybe later in your career where, working at the bedside is just sort of physically, so demanding that you're looking for something else. Some of these roles can be done remote or hybrid. Some of them do involve travel. And I think it's an opportunity for nurses to get greater respect and that work flexibility that I just mentioned. Most importantly, nurses are well suited here. Why? Because nurses are critical thinkers, right? You know this. You're used to taking quantitative data in the way of lab values or scans and combining that with what you hear from the patient and their family, with what you're observing, and putting together a plan of action by putting those two pieces together. You're very innovative and agile. You're having to do it on a daily basis. And this is very valuable to life science companies. Now, I want to be clear that I'm not trying to exacerbate already a nursing shortage that we know we're facing. The reality is, though, that we know that 100,000 nurses have left the profession, completely left in the last 2 years. And I want nurses to know that there are opportunities for you. And I think that you'd agree with this. The more that we expand career opportunities for nurses, the more people that we have going into this field to begin with. Now, anytime you consider a big career pivot, it's a big step, right? And it probably takes a lot of thought and, careful reflection on your part. And I just wanted to outline, some of the maybe small steps that you can be taking to secure that position in this industry. The first thing is you have to educate yourself on the industry. Because as I said, no one's learned about this when we went through training. And it doesn't matter if you are BSN trained, MSN, or DNP trained. We don't learn about the industry. So you got to educate yourself. You've got to connect with people and network with people that are in the industry in the roles that you might find interesting. You can do that on LinkedIn. People are very willing to talk with you about what they do and what the skills are that you might need going into that role. So from there, once you've educated yourself, you might determine there are certain roles that really appeal to you. So research those roles, look at those job descriptions. Maybe your resume is tailored towards those job descriptions. Remember that most companies are now using the talent management system where they do a lot of machine learning, looking for keywords. So you want your resume to have some of the keywords and competencies that's in the job description. and then go ahead and post for the roles and prepare for those interviews. So again, it's a big step. It's a big change to make a career pivot. But if you break it down into small steps, it won't seem so daunting. So the educational program I wanted to just, alert you to is one that I developed in collaboration with the Accreditation Council for Medical Affairs, or ACMA. And I did it with 4 other nurses who work at life science companies who made that transition from the bedside to the industry. So it really is, as I found, the only program that's out there that really is tailored for nurses to give them that pathway into these roles. It helps establish kind of an industry standard. It gives you the credentials and CEU credit for completing the program, 15 hours. And it's completely online using adult learning principles. You can do it at your own pace. And it is, again, a program that you can take up to 6 months to finish it. For most people, they finish it usually in about a month. And again, these are some of the roles that I have seen nurses play in a life science company. So they're quite varied. And for those of you that are interested, we actually wrote a little guide that gives a brief description of each of these roles. And for those that are interested, we'd be happy to send you that free guide as well. But even better than that, today we have Lisa Lee with, who is a former colleague that I worked with for a short period of time at Merck. And she is actually formerly a trauma nurse. That was her training. And she's also a nurse practitioner. But right now, she leads the patient insights for pulmonary hypertension at Merck. And so her role is to really bring the patient needs, ensure that the whole organization understands patient needs, from research all the way through commercialization and resources needed for patients with pulmonary hypertension. So she has over a decade of experience in pharmaceutical industry, which is why I was so happy to have her here, because she's done a number of different roles that she can talk about today. And she also just received last year her doctorate in nursing, and her project focused on something so important to all of us, which is improving diversity in clinical trials by leveraging nurses and nurse practitioners. So love, 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 love that project. So welcome, Lisa.
Thank you, Jan. Thank you so much for having me today.
Yeah, no, happy to have you here. So let's just really start with, how did you even become interested in joining the life science industry?
Yeah, Jan, that's a great question, because I don't think many of us as nurses really begin our career with this mindset of entering the pharmaceutical industry. And most of my colleagues that I talked to sort of ended up here by accident, which I did as well. But I say it's the happiest accident ever that I ended up here, and love being here. So I started my career in nursing really wanting to be a nurse practitioner. And that was my whole intent on going to nursing school. I was inspired by a nurse practitioner and really thought I wanted to live and die in a clinic. I said, I want to work in a clinic the rest of my life. I have no intention on ever leaving a clinic. That's all I want to do, is take care of patients in a clinic. And I had been visited by pharmaceutical representatives, medical science liaisons throughout my career in the clinic, and interested in working with them, but never really thought of myself in that profession. And it wasn't until I had a medical science liaison that called on me that actually started discussing the role with me and said I should really consider this role. And it was interesting because the first question I had is, I said, I'm not even quite sure what a medical science liaison does. What do they do? And so spent a lot of time really trying to understand what the role was. And it wasn't until there was a position that was open and I was asked if I'd like to apply. And I think there's this misconception of the pharmaceutical industry for those of us that are in clinical practice. And I thought, I'm not interested at this point. I really just want to take care of patients. I don't know if I want to cross that bridge and go to the other side. So I declined the opportunity to apply. And this position came open several times throughout the next couple of years. And each time I thought I should consider it, but I didn't. And it wasn't until it come available several times that I said, I think the universe is trying to tell me something, that I should at least consider this opportunity. And I think what I find most interesting about my sort of unconventional path is I really went into the process thinking that I wasn't going to be interested. And it wasn't until I got into the interview that I was so impressed and I felt so passionate. I said, these are my people. They were so passionate about patients and passionate about the science that I really became really excited about the role. So it was just thrilled to start in this industry.
That's great. So tell us a little bit about what is a medical science liaison? Because that is, one of the roles that you had. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question, because I think one of the things that you'll hear a lot in the pharmaceutical world are these acronyms. So you'll hear things like MSL and no one really knows what that means. But really what that stands for, it's a medical science liaison. And what they're really responsible for are building these professional working relationships with healthcare providers. And they really work with them to help them understand scientific studies. So I used to like to say, I'm your non-biased medical resource. My job here is really just to help you understand the data, answer questions for you, and see if there's anything that I can help you better understand about this disease area, or the current available algorithms. So what I really appreciated about that role is that there is some concern, myself included, about stepping back from direct patient care. There's this concern that you won't be having an impact on patients anymore. But what I found was actually not true at all. I was actually able to help more patients because I was able to help patients indirectly through data. So I loved having this impact on my community from a broader, more global sense.
Yeah, no, so true. And we know many nurses still keep their license and, volunteer occasionally at ER, or, do a shift or volunteer using the nursing. So when I know that you took the initiative to complete the BCMAS course, which is the Board Certified Medical Affairs Specialist course. And that's a course that the Accreditation Council for Medical Affairs, who I partnered with, had created. And it actually is, it's a great course, but it was there before we had one specifically for nurses. So I'm just curious, why did you take that educational program, and what benefit do you think it gave you?
Yes, it was actually interesting because I saw this course pop up on several occasions, and I am always looking to see how to learn more, to get better at what I do, to advance my understanding of my role. And this kept coming up. And so I became very interested in taking this course. And it was interesting at the time because they didn't have a specific option for nurses. I had to write and ask if there was an opportunity for myself to take this course. And I was granted the opportunity to take it. And what I really loved about it is that it really was comprehensive on really how a pharmaceutical company and the industry sort of works. And what I mean by that is, coming from the clinician standpoint, I didn't fully understand, what does regulatory do? What does legal do? What are the different areas in sales and commercial and marketing, the different aspects of even the medical affairs team, and how do they work together? And I think, and it's really cogs of like a bigger wheel that I didn't quite understand. And I was deer in headlights coming out of the clinic. So when I took this course, all I could say the whole time was, gosh, I wish I had taken this sooner in my career in industry. I think it really would have helped with some of the challenges that I faced coming into industry, understanding who I need to connect with and why, and who's responsible for what decisions. So for me, I thought it was an incredibly comprehensive course, and I actually recommended it, and I continue to recommend it to my colleagues who are either interested in industry or are new in industry and are trying to better understand how the whole process works.
Yeah, no. Well said. I agree with you I remember working in industry for a long time and someone said pharmacovigilance and I didn't know what it was because you just had never run across that. And, you know, essentially it's a really important role. It's all about patient safety. It's the tracking of adverse events, either in clinical trials or, you know, post-market. So very, very important. So you're no longer an MSL, right? So you're in a new role because of this acquisition of your company, Acceleron, to Merck. So tell us more about, you know, your current role and why being a nurse is so beneficial.
Yes, no, excellent question. So I've had several roles within medical affairs, and I mentioned earlier I started as a medical science liaison, but then I came over to the medical affairs side of things. So a medical science liaison is a field-facing role, meaning I met with clinicians out directly, but then I moved to more of an in-house role where we developed the strategy, and we executed different like clinical trials. And I like to say I was kind of a jack of all trades with medical affairs. So I led several different programs within medical affairs. But one of the key things that I noticed is that within our organization, we had a very robust team of people that sought patient insights really on more the commercial side, but we didn't have anybody that sat in the medical affairs side. And what I mean by that is, you know, do our clinical trials make sense to patients? Would they participate in this? What are the barriers? Do we have issues with diversity, equity, and inclusion for our clinical trials that's somehow hidden in the protocol that we're missing? So ultimately, I became very passionate about we need to speak to patients. I was often pulled in to meetings and asked for my opinion on what I thought patients would say. And my answer was always the same. I can share my personal experience in working with patients, but ultimately we need to ask them because my experience does not speak for all patients. So I advocated really for my own position and said, we really need somebody that sits in this team that seeks patient insights and understands the unmet needs in the space. And it's constantly evolving. And my experience from a decade ago is not necessarily relevant today. So we need to be asking these questions and we need to ask them again as things change. I was given the green light to move forward. And so started this role with patient engagement and patient insights. And then was lucky enough to come over via an acquisition to my current company where I lead patient insights. So for my therapeutic area. So my sole responsibility is to make sure that we're listening to patients, we understand their needs, their wants, and that we are creating solutions that make sense for them, because it's a waste of energy and effort if we're all creating solutions that nobody wants. So I often say I have the best job in the world because I still get to talk to patients and I still get to listen to them and understand them. I don't have to chart anymore. so I'm not charting in the middle of the night. But I really say I have the best job in the world. And I love being able to listen to patients, better understand their stories and their perspectives, and then take that back to the team and say, this is what they're saying that their needs and their wants are.
Yeah. No, it's so important. We had an example where there was packaging that was put together for a new product. There was no patient input to it. It was not intuitive. It had to completely be redone. And that's a perfect example. And so this idea of patient engagement has come a long way in the industry. I go to conferences now, and the teams of people that life science companies have now are so much bigger than what I saw 5 years ago, 10 years ago. So it's definitely gotten traction. So you've talked about MSL, you've talked now about patient insights, and you've worked at 4 different life science companies. So what other roles have you run into at these companies where nurses have been a part of those roles?
Oh gosh, all over. I mean, I think it's interesting because I think a lot of nurses, when they're considering a transition to a pharmaceutical company, their first exposure really is as a medical science liaison, which that's the route that I came in. But as I've grown in this industry, I've met so many nurse professionals that have come in through various different routes, and it's really quite interesting. So that's really why I really encourage nurses who are interested to reach out. But we've had, I mean, I've met nurses that are in, you know, medical information. I've met nurses that are in sales, in medical writing, in various roles within medical affairs. You see them in outcomes research and clinical operations. I mean, the list goes on and on. And you know, we have quite an extensive group of nurses that I work with that are just incredible. And so I think my advice has always been like, reach out to these people that you know that are in industry, ask them about their position, ask them about their role, and see if that's something that you would have an interest in, because there's really lots of opportunities. And so I once was a nurse, a nursing professor that I had years ago had made this comment about there's no excuse for burnout in nursing because there's so many places for you to go. And if you don't like where you are, you can always switch gears and go somewhere else. And I think that's really true in the pharmaceutical world as well, because there's always opportunities for you to shift. And nurses are just so well positioned for adaptability and change and being able to shift and move on to something new quite quickly.
Absolutely. Yep. And, you know, that's why I'm just so passionate about making sure that nurses know about these opportunities. And when Lisa and I worked together at Merck, you know, we had a network of nurses, and it was an opportunity for within the company to meet. And we also started to use the nurses as consultants, internal consultants. So if R&D was doing a research program where they wanted to have a drug that would be self-injected by the patient, what was the syringe that they, now normally they would have to go outside and maybe pay a consultant to tell them that, no, we have these people right here. And they can, you know, so it was, you know, more timely feedback, save money for the company. So that was, you know, good example. Now, you know, when I talk with a lot of nurses, they view pharma as sort of big bad pharma bro. You know, a lot of it's based on a lot of the opioid crisis and Netflix shows that have, you know, mostly been on about Purdue Pharma. But, you know, you've worked at 4 different companies. I've worked at 2 different companies. You know, can you share with us your view of the ethics that you see within the company?
Yeah, I had all those same perceptions. So I was very concerned about coming. I think some people refer to it as the dark side. And it's interesting because I get asked this question a lot. And I was actually pleasantly surprised. If anything, it is highly regulated. It is as far as what we're able to do, how we're able to interact, because there are those protections in place for patients, for our consumers. So I have found that it's been highly ethical, highly responsible. And I think that's important for me because I have to have a position that I feel good about. And so I have reframed that quote of the dark side. I have to call it the light side, because I have a lot of job satisfaction. I have a lot of job pride. When I can rest my head on my pillow quite comfortably at night because I feel like every day when I've gone to bed, I've done the right thing. And everyone I work with echoes the same thing about as long as we're keeping the patient in mind that we're doing the right thing. And so for me, when I talk to people who are considering fields in nursing, I've always said you have to find your why. And for me, my why has always been the patient. And so if what I'm doing every day is benefiting patients, then I feel like I've done my job and I've contributed to this field. So my personal opinion is I have found it very ethical, and I have felt very comfortable with the roles that I've had within medical affairs.
Yeah, great. Yep. Now, I'm going to ask one last question, and then we're going to go to the audience because I can see people, you know, we want to make this very useful for them and they have questions. So, but you're very accomplished. You have several degrees. You got BSN, MSN, now you're DMP. Do you need an advanced degree as a requirement to work in this industry?
You do not. So is it helpful? Yes, it depends on the type of role that you're interested in. So for some, it depends on some companies, and in some positions within medical affairs, they do prefer to have a terminal degree, which is one of my reasons that I pursued mine. I think I mentioned earlier in the discussion that I'm always looking for ways to advance myself and understand and gain more knowledge. And that is why I pursued my DNP, but it is certainly not a requirement. I have many, many, many of my colleagues that have their BSN. Some have their masters, some are nurse practitioners, some are not. You'll really find quite an array of nurse professionals within an organization. And I think what's really lovely about it and really unique is that we all bring different unique perspectives. So on my very first team, my medical science liaison team, I was the only nurse professional. And that was great because my team had PhDs, physicians, we had pharmacists, and I loved it because we all brought a different and unique perspective when we met. And I often attributed it to patient rounds in the morning. You had the member of each team there to give their perspective, to come up with a care plan. And that's really what we saw within our team. So nurse professionals of all backgrounds are well positioned, given the experience and the education that they bring forth. They all provide very, very unique perspectives and insights and talents and gifts to the company.
Yeah, no, well said. And again, so back to the roadmap, the first step is you've got to understand the industry. And you have to be able to demonstrate that through your resume and then the interviews, and then to even know what role really appeals to you. So that's where I think some of the preparation you want to do is really helpful, because the roles vary so greatly. Some are highly scientific, some are very patient or customer facing. So that you really want to see what really appeals to you personally. So let's open it up to questions. Vivian, if there's anything that's come in thus far. Oh, okay. I think we answered that one. Yeah. Does life sciences require an advanced degree? I think we just covered that. So thank you, Michelle, for the question, though. From Marie, can you get considered without the certification and secure after hire? Yeah, absolutely. I think what the certification does for you is it shows you've taken some steps to help yourself understand the industry more broadly than one specific role that you might be applying for. So I think it says that, and it also sort of sets a sort of standard that you've done. Now, you can do it after you're hired as well. But I think, as you heard with Lisa's example, she felt like, oh my God, that was 5 years too late. So just something for you to think about, but obviously not a requirement. Mm-hmm. Next question. This is very inspiring. My father was treasurer for Pfizer, yet never thought of this aspects. That's funny. Yeah. Yeah. And what are some of the job titles or roles that I can do? So, I think we went through some of them, but let's do a quick little overview of them. So you have, as Lisa was mentioning, medical information. So remember, these companies have an obligation for either HCPs or general consumers or patients who are seeking questions and information from the company. And it's all has to be obviously accurate, unbiased, and within the label of the given product. So that's, one area. Another area is even, medical education, which Lisa touched on a bit too, where you are working to understand what are the unmet educational needs that scientific leaders or key opinion leaders have, and helping with a third party to put together a credentialed medical education. Is sort of another area. The medical science liaison, I think we covered that pretty well. Outcomes research the last mile, if you will, of getting a product to patients is insurers have to cover it or governments have to cover it. And that all gets back to what's the value of this product? What's the value to generally to society? And is it better than what's currently out there? And that's all the value and outcomes research studies that companies need to invest in and to do. And many nurses excel in that role as well. And clinical trial operations is a very big role as well, because there are so many trials that are going on. Nurses are great because they can really help problem solve with sites on any recruitment challenges they're having, retention challenges. Again, if these trials move quickly, they get to patients faster, ensuring that all the data is collected, ensuring that all of these things are happening on budget and on time. Very, very critical role. And that tends to be a more field-based role as well. Patient engagement, I think we covered pretty well. Health equity is another area that life science companies are very focused on because they too are a major player in healthcare, and they want to help do what they can to decrease and eliminate disparities that we see in healthcare and help to improve, diversity in clinical trials, for example. And then employee health is another area, generally in occupational health. So, that's just a quick overview, but we can send you the guide that just does a bit of an overview of some of these roles.
Yeah, and I think one of the things too, Jan, to add on to that is if you're one of those folks that really still likes to have your hands-on skills, I've had nurse colleagues that have been nurse educators that are flying out to clinical sites or to hospitals to teach them how to work with the equipment. And there's also other roles where nurses actually can go out and see patients. So it really depends on the role. If you're really want to keep your feet wet in actual hands-on nursing skills, I have colleagues that actually still work and or volunteer. And then we have colleagues that also are able to travel out and work with hospitals. On a side note with the volunteering, I also wanted to keep my feet wet with patient care because I still have taken care of patients. So I did a lot of overseas medical service trips. So I've done 5 in Latin America, providing primary care and then educating students in the next generation on nursing and how to take H&Ps and vital signs. So lots of opportunities to still stay, quote unquote, in hands-on nursing, even though you're in a technically corporate world.
Yeah, no, that's such a good addition. Thank you. Forgot about the nurse educators. That's such an important role. Absolutely. Other questions, Vivian? I'm a nurse anesthetist. Is there a place for me? We are so specialized. Yeah, I would look at companies that actually have products for anesthesia. Medical device would also be another area that would definitely use a nurse anesthetist.
Yeah, I would agree. How I ended up where I am is because I had unique skills in a rare disease. So when you have a unique skill, you're highly sought after. So because I care for a rare disease, I had this unique knowledge in this very small area. And as a nurse anesthetist, I imagine there's many opportunities. And to Jan's point, medical device, I think would be great, but there are many opportunities.
What does the salary range look like? I think that it varies with some of the roles. As Lisa mentioned, the medical science liaison tends to be on the higher end, whereas something like medical information might be a little bit lower. And that's because some of the medical science liaisons, they do look for that advanced degree. So I think the salary range can vary. But again, most of these companies have good benefits with 401k. As I mentioned, some have pension. Generally, I think you're going to find the salary is higher than what you're seeing in the clinical setting. I know it certainly was the case that, those that took a credentialed program also found that they were able to command a little higher salary as well, because you've already made an investment in yourself. Yeah. Plus, the educational tuition reimbursement type of thing as well is pretty standard.
Oh, yes, the tuition reimbursement is great. That was
great. That's how your DMP was funded. Right. No, that's great. What are the companies we can start looking into to explore career opportunities? Well, that's as simple as doing a Google search on, top life science companies in the U.S. If you're based in the U.S. Obviously, this is a global industry, so there are lots of opportunities outside the U.S., but I would just start with a Google search there and begin to look at what the opportunities are. You can go to Indeed and Glassdoor, and you can find jobs that are posted and then job descriptions, and then really use that as a way to define what you're most interested in. Are there other certifications that would also be helpful? Lisa, I don't know. Do you want to take that one?
Yeah, that's a great question. I was trying to think. Yeah. I can't think of additional ones for roles in industry that are helpful. The only certification that I have is, the BCMAS. So, I don't know. I'll have to think. I think it probably depends on what roles, and there's probably certifications that are available for specific roles that I'm not aware of. I think it really depends on what avenue that you're pursuing. For me, being in medical affairs, my path is a bit different than my nurse colleagues that are in sales. Mm-hmm. They may have, different avenues, or those that are in medical information. I'm not as familiar with those other roles, but for me, this is the only certification that I have.
Yeah, I've noticed on LinkedIn that there's communities like for pharmacovigilance, there's communities for clinical research, and there are some certifications that are available through those communities as well. I think the first thing is figure out how the industry works, how is it regulated, and then what roles really are, your area of interest. So I think that's, just some of the basics that you want to start with. But I think, you'll find if you're in life science, it's constant learning, right? Because, and just like you find in the clinical setting, you're constantly learning because science and patient care continues to advance.
Right. Which that's the fun part. I mean, after my project with my DNP, now I'm working on launching that, and how do I expand that? Because that not only has crossover to my role, but it's a personal interest, and I'm constantly interested in how do we increase exposure for nurses, increase their autonomy and what they're able to do. So for me, it's a love of never stopping learning. So I'm constantly looking for new ways to expand my knowledge and see how we can expand the field of nursing.
Yes. Well, you're a good testament to that. So thank you. Good role model. Thank you for doing this. Can you leverage your experiences into executive roles like chief nurse executive or a VP of a certain function like sales or marketing? Yeah, I think you're going to see in the future, Lisa's going to be a nurse executive at one of these companies. She's definitely so talented and has that potential. But, before I retired, I was actually a vice president in leading commercial roles, leading customer-facing teams, commercial operations, and then a vice president of patient innovation and engagement at Merck, leading the Center of Excellence to bring the patient perspective into the company. And that was a VP role that was 2 away from the CEO. And that continues to be a similarly ranked role. And I think I had the role because I was a nurse, and because there was a belief that nurses really understand patients. And so to set up that Center of Excellence, it was really important to have someone that, could really bring that perspective forward. So I do think I have a colleague at Moderna, and the woman leading medical affairs at Moderna is a nurse. I have another contact at Sanofi who is in medical affairs at a senior vice president level. She is a nurse. So I'm starting to see a lot of nurses that are in many high level roles. And it's good to see them starting to be VPs and CEOs of health systems. So I think we're starting to see more, but it's definitely, it can happen.
Yeah, I've seen the same. And I think, Jan, you're a true testament to that. And I've met several nurse colleagues across companies that are VPs. They're so absolutely. I mean, I think the answer to this question would be absolutely. And we're seeing in healthcare systems and within biotech and pharmaceutical organizations as well. So, which is really nice to see. And it's nice to see nurses in these leadership positions, but definitely happening, and it's not uncommon. So it happens quite a bit.
Great, thank you. Where or how do you search for a life science position? So again, we talked about the fact that you can do a Google search and you can find these companies, right? Which, in many places they're in your backyard, these companies. But in terms of looking for a position, you can check Indeed or Glassdoor, as I mentioned. On LinkedIn, and Lisa and I talked about this, we really think once you've identified a role that appeals to you, that you can do a search on LinkedIn. You can look for people that are in that role. And sometimes it's good to start with your own alumni, right? There's a way on LinkedIn where you can go to, let's say you went to University of Michigan. You go to University of Michigan, you click the alumni button, and in the alumni button, you look for people at, let's say, Pfizer. Okay. And it will connect you in a certain geographical area that you identify of people there that are the alumni from where you went, but are now working at a pharmaceutical company that maybe you're interested in pursuing. And that's how you reach out to these people. And again, most people, I think, are very willing to extend their time and their expertise to talk with you about their journey. Is there a job bank for these types of roles? There isn't a job bank, but again, certainly you can find these on, Indeed, Glassdoor. Sometimes you'll see them on LinkedIn. Some of these positions are also posted as well. So that's the best way. Can you describe some of the mobility within a life science company for nurses? Yeah, I mean, I think, and I'll ask Lisa to comment on what she's seen, because she's worked at 4 different companies. I've worked at 2. I think what you tend to see is maybe nurses coming into medical information or medical writing as sort of, the first entree in, and then, progressing into other roles that utilize those same skills as well as their nursing skills, maybe into pharmacovigilance, maybe into clinical trial operations, maybe into, medical science liaison. So the good news is there is mobility. And, sometimes people start in sales because they certainly know a certain therapeutic area. They know a lot of providers in that area. And then from there, they branch out into other different roles. So there is no one career path. It just really kind of depends on where your areas of interest are. Lisa, how would you answer that?
No, absolutely. And I've done the same, because I had this mobility through my various roles in different companies because I really found my passion. And I essentially created this position for myself in my former company, and that grew from there. So when I started, I mentioned at the beginning, I started thinking I wanted to live and die in a clinic. And then when I became an MSL, I said, this is what I want to do the rest of my life. This is great. And then found this other opportunity in medical affairs because of my passion for this particular program. and then found my passion for patient engagement. And so now when I get asked, well, what do you want to do with your career? I don't know, because there's so many opportunities out there that some I haven't even yet discovered. And so I didn't realize this position existed when I first started in pharma. So there is tons of mobility. I have colleagues that have, as you mentioned, Jan, that have started in sales, but really have a passion for patient engagement and have moved over, have a passion for medical affairs and have made that transition. I have other colleagues that have moved the other direction, that started in medical affairs and said, I really am interested in the marketing side of things and how do they run the commercial side of things, and have transitioned to that area. So there's lots of flexibility, lots of mobility. Really, it's about putting it out there. And I think my mother used to always say, you have to make your desires known. So when it was my birthday and it was time to blow out the candles, she said, don't keep your secret a wish, because it won't come true, because no one will know what it is you want. So I try to adopt that philosophy and make sure that I share what my interests are and what my passions are, because the people that can put you in those positions will hear it and are listening and will think of you when those opportunities and those positions come open. So and there's positions that haven't even yet been created. Companies are constantly being innovative and thinking of different ways, and new teams and new positions are created. And so there's always new things on the horizon.
Yeah, well said. Let's see. I'm a nurse informaticist. Nice. With a master's of science in health informatics, struggling to find a position. Can you advise how and where to break into the industry? Oh my God, I would say you would be so valuable to a life science company. Why? Because they're all working very, very hard to pull together different data platforms, different data sources. How do we use more data, more refined data to help us identify patients for clinical trials faster, to help us with targeting as it relates to marketing, just so much. So, when I think about the data science team at Merck, they were a very big team, and there was just so much that was happening in terms of how they were being consulted to help improve the business just by utilizing data better. Lisa, what do you think? What are you seeing?
No, absolutely. And I think I would think you would be well positioned for a role within industry. So I would be curious. I wish we could have a two-way dialogue, because I would be curious. I know you mentioned you're struggling to find a position, and I wonder if are you struggling to find something that's posted, or are you struggling really to break in? And I think I'm happy to expand on that, or happy to discuss with you offline. But sometimes it can be tricky to find posted positions, and there are positions that are out there that may not come across LinkedIn and may not be posted. And so we can talk a little bit about networking.
Yeah, so important. So important. But I think, yeah, that'd be great. What assets did your nurse practitioner experience bring? Great question. Yeah.
No, that is a great question. There's a great quote, and I know I'm going to misquote it, so I'll just give you the highlights. But there's a great quote from a nurse professional that talks about how nurses are just so well positioned for roles in industry. And here's my thought on it. As a nurse practitioner, nurses are great at being able to triage and understand what is urgent, what can wait. But what I think the unique skill that nurses and nurse practitioners bring is we are very adept at being able to communicate high-level scientific data at a level that patients can understand. So we can turn to a patient and speak on very patient-friendly terms, so that a patient understands what we're trying to say, and then turn right around and talk to our scientific colleagues at this very highly scientific level. And that is the unique skill that I've seen my nurse colleagues bring, is being able to communicate the scientific data, understand patient education, really understanding the patient perspective and what patients really need. It's really a comprehensive role that nurses and nurse practitioners bring value to the company. I think probably more so than any profession, really, because of our diversity and our ability to communicate so easily back and forth between different levels of education. So my nurse practitioner experience brought forth that, but also because I had direct experience with taking care of the patients that I'm now responsible for my therapeutic area. I really understand not only the patient perspective, but what happens in these clinics, what happens in these hospitals, so that my expectations are realistic as far as what types of initiatives we think that we should move forward with that would make sense for the community.
Yeah. Just so money isn't wasted, right? So that it's appropriate for the sites of care.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's great. I know we're coming up. Let's just take a couple more questions, and then Lisa, I'm going to ask you to think about the best piece of advice you want to give the nurses today. So I'll let you start thinking about that. Is there any mental health support available for nurses in the field of the life science? Well, that's all really wrapped up in a very strong benefit package. I know that when I worked at a life science company, my son was a teenager having some struggles, and I was able to get free counseling because it was an employee assistance program to help you with something that you were dealing with as a family. There's certainly plenty of mental health support for you as an employee yourself. So it's really all wrapped up into what I think are very, very good health benefits.
I would agree. I've seen that too. So there's great support.
Yeah. How would you advise a nurse with a master's in health administration to position themselves for opportunities? Well, health administration, I think it's fantastic. Why? Because you have just studied all about the issues that we're currently facing in healthcare. And life science companies are one stakeholder of many in the healthcare environment. You certainly bring to that an understanding of all of the other stakeholders that are in healthcare and what their issues are and needs are. So, I think sometimes, for people that have worked at a company for a long time, they might start to just have that one view of, oh, here we are, we're a pharmaceutical manufacturer, research and developer, but not realizing all the major changes that are happening for health systems or for academic centers that are dealing with clinical research. So I love the fact that you would bring that holistic view of what healthcare is experiencing, challenges and opportunities. Lisa, what do you think?
No, I agree, because I think one of the big challenges that there is in the industry, especially for folks who've never worked in a hospital, have never been in a clinic, is there's can often be a disconnect. And I think I mentioned in the last question about understanding what would work in a hospital, what would work in a clinic, and what absolutely wouldn't. And sometimes our colleagues need to better understand that as far as what makes sense and what's practical for patients, for clinicians, and for hospitals. So I would think that you would be well positioned. And if it were me, I would really focus on your key knowledge of the inner workings of hospitals, of clinics, and how this all works, because that is something that most people that are in industry probably don't have a lens into, that you provide that unique perspective and unique experience and skill that they don't have.
Yeah, that is so true. I mean, quite often there's a lot of PhDs that work in the industry, right? But the PhDs have never been at the sites of care, never been in that interaction with the patient and their family. So, so I know that we're just about out of time. So, can you elaborate on the course of the exam? This will be the final question. Time commitment. So, yes, the course takes about 20 hours to complete. It's 15 modules. There is a final exam that is really, the final questions are taken from all of the knowledge checks in every single module of the 15 modules. Each module has learning objectives. It has activities that help you apply your knowledge. And then obviously then knowledge check questions at the end, which then become the final exam. So as I mentioned, for people that are working, it seems like it takes people about a month to maybe finish. And again, it's the 15 hours of nursing credit that you get at the end of that, which I think for most nurses is an annual requirement for most states. So that's kind of a nice benefit there.
Mm-hmm.
So Lisa, take us home here. What's the one piece of advice that you would give nurses that are thinking about making this transition?
No, thanks for the question, Jan. And when in thinking about this, I thought, boy, I really have, I guess, more 2 to 3 pieces of advice, and they're interconnected. But my first piece of advice is to be open and adaptable. So I mentioned at the beginning of my career, I didn't really fully understand what a medical science liaison was. I wasn't seeking a role as a medical science liaison. This really sort of came across my desk. I asked a lot of questions. I was interested in it, and then decided to pursue that option. Throughout my career, I've learned to be adaptable, to be open to what other opportunities are out there, because you never know what might be out there. So I would say if you're interested in a role in industry, be open and be adaptable and be willing to listen to the different roles that are out there, because there may be something amazing that you didn't know existed, or you may have one position that will put you on the path to get there. So when I went to nursing school, I wanted to be a nurse practitioner. Being a nurse was a means to an end. I was trying to get to be a nurse practitioner, but I knew that that's where I wanted to be. So I had to be adaptable and be open, and that's where I wanted to be. So I would really recommend that you explore a lot of opportunities, that you really ask a lot of questions. And that really leads into my final piece of advice is networking. I mentioned previously that there's positions that come across LinkedIn, but not every position that's out there comes across LinkedIn. You may not catch it, or maybe it's been posted for a while. So you may miss some opportunities if that's the only way that you're really seeking roles in industry. I'm always open to answering questions and talking with people. So please feel free to reach out to me. But I really encourage you to network with other professionals that are in the industry. If you have those that, come into your hospital, come into your clinic, sit down with them, ask questions about their role. If you can, it's great to shadow people. And I encourage my nursing students to do that too. Please shadow, because often you think you want one role, you shadow, and you decide that's something that's not in your field of interest, and you want to do something very different. So network, ask questions. And as I mentioned before, if somebody knows you have an interest, they can let you know if there's things coming up, or there's a position that they think that you would be a good fit for, and they can advocate for you. So really use your network as best as possible, and reach out and ask a lot of questions.
Yeah, no, very, very good advice. And since I retired from Merck, I have really found LinkedIn networking to be really, really powerful. And I just encourage you, if you're not happy, do something about it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? This may not be it, okay? But consider something different then. But you have to take action on wanting to change your current situation. And I'm not saying it's easy. There's a lot to it, but you will be happier in the end, and you deserve that. So thank you so much for Lisa, for being here with us. You shared so many good insights. I really appreciate that. And thank you to all of you that took the time to listen here today. And we have some follow-up materials we can send to you. And like Lisa, I'm happy to talk with people offline. Just find us on LinkedIn.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yep. Thank you.